Today we're going to talk about the Swiss National Bank and this article that appeared today in the Financial Times. And it says here that the Swiss Central Bank has built a $167 billion tech-led U.S. stock portfolio. And it basically has the 7 big tech stocks. And you can see here in the third paragraph, they have $42 billion invested in 5 companies: Amazon, Apple, Meta, Microsoft, and NVIDIA. Okay? How does this come about? And they say this is not a sovereign wealth fund. This is the SNB's $855 billion balance sheet of assets. So what are we talking about here? Well, again, so many historic things going on. I have no idea how this is going to come about, okay? So the first thing is when COVID hit, everyone did QE. How did the central banks do QE? They printed money, they bought their own bonds. So they print their currency, they buy their bonds in the currency, and they put that onto the balance sheet, okay? Here's the problem. For Switzerland, they had extremely low interest rates. And so they were terrified that, again, that if they printed the money for COVID in the Swiss franc and bought the Swiss franc bank bonds, down would go the interest rates, they would go negative. They didn't want to do that, okay? So they said, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to print the Swiss franc, but then we're going to turn around and we're going to buy other people's currencies around the world, okay, and invest in stocks and bonds in other countries, all right? And this got over to be over $1 trillion worth of stocks and bonds in other people's currency that they held around the world. Now, I'm going to introduce another concept here, and again, I have no idea how this plays out. The unique thing also in this thing is that the Swiss have an Swiss franc. And so the only thing that matters here is if you have an Swiss franc and you quote unquote create it to go buy the other currencies and buy their stocks and bonds, there is no corresponding Swiss franc, physical Swiss franc from the Swiss franc. And this is critically important, okay? So I have posted on my TikTok, pinned as they say, 3 videos they did starting last August, okay? And then I think it's November and then December on this exact issue and all the things that are going on that make this thing insane, okay? So now you have a Swiss franc, or you have a Swiss National Bank, but it's not like the bank, the Federal Reserve in America. This bank is actually all the cantons' banks, okay? So they're representative of the canton banks. So there's a major structural difference. So here's the issue. They've been trying for years now to bring this money home, okay? But they haven't been able to bring it home because think of what you'd have to do if you're the Swiss bank. You would have to sell the stocks and bonds in another currency, get the cash in that currency, and turn around and buy your own currency, the Swiss franc, which of course could drive it to negative territory. And the Swiss franc can go way up, which would be highly deflationary, especially for an export country. And this is now even exasperated, okay? So I made these videos last year before Trump came in, before Liberation Day, and before the Swiss franc went up 15% against the US dollar, okay? So, and again, when we go back to this article today in the Financial Times on the $167 billion in our stocks, you must remember something if you're the Swiss bank. You have to minus the 15%. So if the portfolio, I have no idea what it is, if it was up 25%, it's actually only up 10% because of the 15% move in the Swiss franc. And if it's up 15%, they got 0. And if their portfolio is up 10%, they've lost 5%. So you just have to remember what's going on here. And because it's an e-currency, it doesn't actually exist as a physical currency inside Switzerland. So when they sell their e-currency and they come back and they buy the Swiss franc, what's going to happen here? They can't do that. Plus, look where their interest rates are, 0.21%. This is on the 10-year, okay? So if we bring back and we buy, what's going to happen? They're going to buy the bonds, the Swiss bonds, and down will go there, and there'll be a negative interest rate, which they don't want to do. Now, this article today goes on with this Arturo Brice, finance minister in Switzerland. He says, but they don't want to take any role in these companies. It's purely a tool to manage the currency. So think about something. The Financial Times is saying, why aren't you a sovereign fund? They don't manage the money. They're actually debating, should they hire a manager to manage all the money overseas? Are they overweighted with NVIDIA? You know what I'm saying? They just bought them and hold them. That's it. Nothing else, okay? And by the way, for the SNB, it has nothing to do with the investments. It has only to do with one thing. What is the Swiss currency? That's all they care about. And in the second paragraph here, they say the SNB is a conservative institution, but is highly unconventional. Okay, well, I would say they're the only country in the world. Now you say, oh, the Bank of Japan. Okay, good point, except for one thing. The Japanese print their currency and they buy their own stocks and their own bonds in their currency. They can then maneuver around. So think of what everyone's talking about today. Everyone is terrified that the Japanese currency could collapse because the inflation rates are up and they don't have the ability to raise their interest rate. So you got one or two things going to happen in Japan. Either they're going to raise their interest rate and break their fiscal bank, or they're going to let the yen fall down. You make up your own mind. My opinion is they'll let the yen fall. And when the yen falls, okay, people are afraid they're going to sell their 1.1 trillion in U.S. treasuries or their 900 billion in stocks and bonds around the world, okay? Now you take it over to the Swiss. Totally different situation. This is literally the central bank, but they own all these other currencies. And given what just happened with the Swiss franc, it's up 15% against the dollar for an export nation. If they try to bring this home, what's going to happen to their currency? What's going to happen to their interest rates? Exactly what they don't want to happen. Now, in my previous videos, you'll see the Swiss have discussed everything. They said, let's sell it and then divide up the money and give it to all the Swiss citizens. Except it brings it back to the same problem. If we sell everything and we give it to the Swiss, what are they going to do with it? They're going to buy the Swiss franc or they're going to buy bonds or whatever. But again, right back into the same spot. They say, let's create a sovereign fund, but they don't know how to do that because it's never been done before. Who manages the Swiss banks' equity holdings across the world? By the way, they have 2,300 holdings across the world. And they say here, this approach is fundamental departure on how other central banks operate. Maybe they're right, all right? Maybe they did the right thing. But they say here, everyone else creates their money to buy their own government bond. But they went over and they invested money overseas in bonds and equities. And now they're conducting what analysts call foreign quantitative easing. That's what they're calling this, foreign quantitative easing. So why do we care? Okay, let's just take any narrative, invent it yourself. France falls apart, the euro goes down. Euro's going up today though, by the way, but the euro goes down. Or the Japanese scenario hits, the yen carry trade breaks, and they start selling their U.S. stocks. Now you're the Swiss bank, or down goes the U.S. stocks. What do you do as the Swiss bank? Do you liquidate your portfolio and bring it home? And if you're bringing it home, how do you bring it home? What happens to the Swiss franc? What happens to the interest rate? Given what's going on in the world, this is insanity. So go back and watch my previous videos. I'll post them all. And tell me what you think they should do, how they should do it, and what does it mean to us. Like and follow.